1, 2, 3.
Yep.
It is?
So when I switch it back and you see yourself on the screen, you can start
Okay.
again.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Yep. Well, some technical difficulties, and it's kind of interesting because we are talking about Psalm 69 who deals with technical difficulties of our lives. But my focus in Happiness in the City is on relationship between politics and God, because that's something that is new experience to me. And I have high education in political science, so I was fortunate to read history and tradition of political theory, political philosophy, and political science. But I realized that the deep meaning of politics comes from understanding God as ruler, God as king, as Lord of everything He created. And that is difficult. And as I've been developing knowledge about this important topic, I realized that there is dimension of language communication concerning the Bible that is very complex, magnificently complex. When I was growing up in Poland, I got very good education, but Bibles at that time when I was growing up were only in churches. We didn't have any Bibles in our school libraries. At universities, I never saw a Bible. They probably were there hidden somewhere. And I ended up studying English and American literature. And it was taken for granted that you just read a book like David Copperfield or Shakespeare, and you just apply whatever current knowledge you have to the understanding of those books. And I remember that one day, one of my professors who lectured on Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright, very beautiful poem, and he looked at me very powerfully and said, "You cannot understand English and American literature if you don't know the Bible." So somehow he knew that I didn't know the Bible. I knew it from churches, but I didn't know it visually by reading it, studying it, writing about it. And that shook me up. And I didn't really understand what it meant until I started asking God Himself about political communication and political authority. And then I realized that as we read those words, they don't come just from the current generation. There's this multidimensional heritage of meaning, spirit, power, and authority that comes from former generations. It's a form of what we today know as algorithm, but it's divine algorithm. It's divine heritage and dimension of communication that surpasses limits of current generation. And it's very powerful. And it's relaxing on the heart and on the mind, because it is a bit like coming to a giant grocery store and having all of those things to select. And this is at the level of language and communication. So not every language has that, but English has that. And after reading the Psalms, and especially Psalm 69, which talks about lamentations and kings' call to God for help and salvation, I realized that one of the traumas in my heart was disconnection of my heritage, my heart, from reading the Bible. Of course, my language, my mother's language is Polish, so that meant Polish language. But it's much more complicated than that, because I come from a city with multinational and multilinguistic heritage, city of Gdansk. And it's a 1,000-year-old city created by Cistercian monks and then developed by Templar monks and Teutonic monks and Jagiellonian knights and Jagiellonian kings. And I realized that by not knowing the dimension of my heritage, I created a certain disconnection in my heart. My heart always was longing for it, but didn't know what it is. So as I've been studying political aspects of King David's meaning in Psalms, I realized that a lot of pain that we have is because we got disconnected from that powerful heritage. And it's life-giving, it's elevating, it's not something that we can fake. It is deeply grounded in our bloodlines, in our hearts, and in our understanding of how to organize peace, security, and safety, and rules and regulations. So I'm very I'm very happy that God has led me to this understanding. I'm reading this Psalm today, 69, in English, but I read it in my native language, Polish, now with connection to that linguistic heritage of sacred words of God, and I perceived levels of heritage in my heart that I didn't even know were there. And it's powerful beauty. It is something that our ancestors treasured. They knew it. I come from an area that is not very far from where a very famous astronomer, Nicholas Copernicus, worked. And I remember when I was a little girl, I was taken there on a school trip, and one of the guides showed us the place where he worked, and I looked at it and looked at the sky, and at that moment incredible light showed up that still is with me, that guided me actually all the way to MIT. And it's a light that came from Nicholas Copernicus having that connection in his heart, in his soul, to that dimension of divine communication that he inherited, that he also managed to expand, not only through his native German language, but also he learned Polish and Hebrew and probably many other languages too. But at that time, Hebrew was considered the foundation of biblical credibility. It was very, very important to acknowledge Hebrew and to learn it if someone could. It wasn't that easily available. But then over centuries, I realized that Polish language got very connected to Hebrew dimensions and has that direct contact with politics and leadership of Israel's kings. So as I started reading the Psalms from the point of politics, this connection woke up in my heart. And it is joy that I cannot explain in words. It's joy of knowing that God loves us, that God is the that God is the one who provides for us, and that we can talk with Him, communicate at that level. Such communication doesn't happen in a profane way. It connects to the sacred dimension of language communication, but we can connect to it. And I think that this is what we need. We need it all over the world, but many countries like Poland, like America, England, Italy, Greece, Israel, Russia, we have at least 1,000 years of that divine political communication heritage. And we don't have to start anew. We can ask God to connect us to it and then pass it on to future generations. And I almost missed it. I almost ended up in this profane way of communicating without having any understanding and knowledge about what I was missing. When we look at communication today in the governments, they seem to be disconnected from the beauty of authority that we have in our hearts. King David teaches us how to regain it. And this Psalm 69 talks a lot about loss and about need to be defended from very dangerous people and situations. And constantly we know in the Psalm that he is crying, but he has audience, and that audience is God himself. So there's nothing more powerful in healing matters of authority than this. This leads me to say that a lot of what is happening today in the world is because of that disconnection of authority from God. The entire Middle East is in torment because of that. Russia has horrible war because it got disconnected from that dimension of divine communication during communism. It wasn't completely disconnected, but at the level of security and politics and language it was. Even when you look at the highest level of Russian government, the speech is very profane. And when you look at Ukraine, that has heritage connection both to Russian Empire and Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, both countries that have huge divine political dimension in relationships to God. Even in Ukraine, it's very profane. And when we look at what is happening in American political language, same thing. So we have that disconnection in England too, though England never lost divine authority, but it lost connection to it in the context of current politics. So we have to ask God to help us with that, to bring His hand to the international communications, and those countries like Israel, like Poland, like England, like America, like Russia, who have that tradition of divine politics, that God can heal us first. France, Spain, all the European countries. And I think that this time peace will come through this reconnection to the divine levels of beauty, power, life, and law, and finance that we have in our heritage. Because current wars are not caused by economic reasons. They are symptoms of this very deep pain in the nations who want to inherit what is beautiful in their countries and traditions, but they are blocked. So when we look at how people communicate with former Soviet Union republics, we see this connection not only between current countries and Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, but the disconnection is between the current governments and people that they rule and the whole world. So the whole world got this very narrow way to communicate politically, and there's no human way to solve it, but there's divine way. And God can heal that. And that healing will come from the countries that already have that tradition and heritage, and then it will go into the whole world. That's how we will receive peace from God and will continue our lives in peace. I really believe that this can happen now that I understand what was the root cause of the current conflicts. So let's believe that this Christmas season will bring God's presence to the whole world and heal me. I need healing on this. And heal people all over the world, so that we have also knowledge that there is something higher in our political interaction than just the limits of our current way. And we now have technology that makes it very easy for people to access the Bibles. So this is one of the ways in which we can receive those blessings from God. There is no limit to anyone in the world. Not every country has that multidimensional divine heritage, but they can learn from those countries who have that, and that is a form of peace too. So we have to live within what our hearts can handle, what our bloodlines can handle, and not to block something that can not only make our lives beautiful, but it can also show other nations what they can learn by asking God to be their king. So let's continue in this hopeful message, and I believe that that reconnection to the holy communication with God in Russia, in Ukraine, in Poland, Germany, France, America, all over the world, that already had that tradition, that will bring foundation within our hearts that then will create not only peace between all the Christian nations and Israel, and between Israel and Christian nations, but then they also will be able to show other nations what tremendous, magnificent beauty comes with connecting their communications to divine communications with God. Thank you so much, and see you here next time for another edition of Happiness in the City with Barbara Knoll.